The obsidian surfaces of the grand conclave of Xylos absorbed the ambient luminescence of the suspended stellar projection, rendering the chamber a vast, echoing chasm of shadow and polished gravity. Rows upon rows of the venerable counselors, their tripartite eyes reflecting the distant, swirling nebulae mapped onto the central dais, remained motionless, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming faintly under the regulated pressure fields. The silence was not one of peace, but of profound, collective anxiety, a tension so thick it felt like a physical impediment to respiration, even for species adapted to vastly different atmospheric compositions. At the apex of the tiered seating, the prime curator, Xylos Prime, shifted slightly, the minute movement echoing loudly in the stillness, his own form, larger and burdened by the weight of consensus, radiating a palpable sense of apprehension. They spoke not of borders, not of resources, but of the anomaly, the unpredictable variable that had insinuated itself into the serene, millennia-spanning calculus of galactic politics. The Terran hegemony, or as their own transmissions self-identified, humanity. The debate had been suspended for what felt like an epic cycle, the weight of potential catastrophe pressing down on every assembled intelligence. It was the ambassador of the Cathar Dominion, a creature whose physiology was based on resonant frequency rather than corporeal structure, that finally broke the impasse, his concerns projected not through sound waves, but through subtle, modulating pressures against the crystalline floor. We have analyzed the subspace distortion signatures recorded during the initial contact phase. The propulsion vectors are inconsistent with known physics derived from stable matter interaction. They violate efficiency parameters by a factor we cannot reconcile without assuming fundamental error in our understanding of energy containment. They move like ghosts wrapped in fire. The implication hung heavy. If the Terrans operated outside established physical laws, their power was incalculable, their intentions unknowable. Opposing this fear was the voice of the archivist caste of the Signian Collective, synthesized through careful, measured pulses of controlled plasma discharge. Arrogance, Cathar. You mistake unfamiliarity for impossibility. Our analysis of their electromagnetic leakage, the primitive but powerful signals they broadcast across their local spectrum, suggests a species recently emerging from a self-imposed technological adolescence. Their energy signature is crude, characterized by waste heat and inefficient channeling. They are noisy, volatile, and profoundly disorganized in their internal governmental structure, a chaotic amalgam of competing tribalisms barely contained within planetary boundaries. Fear is a corrosive solvent. It dissolves logic. The Signian perspective, steeped in the observation of countless emergent species, favored underestimation, a historical habit that had cost the galaxy dearly in past confrontations. Xylos Prime focused his collective sensors on the data streams projected before him, streams detailing the brief, unsettling exchange of diplomatic credentials. The Terrans had offered no grand pronouncements, no complex treaties, merely a set of logistical parameters for formal engagement. Their vessel, the Ares Mandate, a dull gray, angular construct utterly devoid of the elegant ornamentation favored by established stellar powers, sat locked in geosynchronous orbit above the designated diplomatic moon, a silent, imperturbable challenge. Their pragmatism is unnerving, Xylos Prime projected internally, filtering the thought through the conclave's shielded network. No species achieving interstellar capability prioritizes pure function over aesthetic representation unless they are either utterly desperate or utterly convinced of their own inherent superiority. We have observed no signs of desperation in their resource profile analysis. Therefore, we must consider the latter. The debate continued, cycling through historical precedents, comparative sociology, and purely theoretical physics, all filtering through the lens of profound uncertainty regarding this small, aggressively tenacious species from the periphery of the Orion Arm. They spoke of the Terran concept of sovereignty, a brittle, fiercely defended notion that seemed to grant equal weight to the decisions of an individual microbe herder on a minor moon as to the collective will of their planetary governing body. They could not map it onto the tiered, structured hierarchies of galactic governance. Humanity was a paradox encased in poorly shielded reactor cores. Hours bled into each other, marked only by the subtle dimming and brightening of the navigational stars in the central display. Finally, Xylos Prime imposed a decree of temporary cessation. We have exhausted the parameters of predictive modeling based on existing xenological pro. Files, the data is insufficient. We will proceed with the planned reception. The delegation must be treated with the customary rights of first contact neutrality, yet vigilance must be absolute. Let the Terran representatives enter the outer reception chamber. Let us observe their physicality, their psychological resilience, their capacity for the ritualized deceit that underpins all successful interstellar diplomacy. A ripple of faint electrochemical discharge passed through the seated bodies, a collective sigh of resignation mixed with sharpened alertness. The waiting was over. The confrontation, in its most subtle form, was about to begin. The transfer sequence was swift, automated by Xylosian protocols designed for rapid environmental adaptation. The three human delegates, designated by their originating command structure as the lead envoy, the chief strategist, and the cultural observer, moved with an economy of motion that struck the assembled observers as almost violent in its efficiency. They were encased in segmented, pressurized suits of matte black material, obscuring all but their helmet visors, through which only the faint, rhythmic glow of internal life support was discernible. They were bipedal forms, built with a startling symmetry, disturbingly similar to the archaic, foundational forms of the long-dead progenitors, yet lacking the inherent grace or the established biological logic of the surviving races. When the atmospheric seals hissed open into the observation gallery overlooking the formal meeting space, a vast, circular platform designed to project power through sheer, isolating scale, the humans paused. They did not rush, nor did they display the nervous preening common to newly emergent species attempting to mimic galactic sophistication. They simply stood, their bodies perfectly still, absorbing the magnitude of the chamber, the gravity of the assembled council, the sheer, overwhelming presence of the Xylosian Empire. The lead envoy, designated Ambassador Kalen Voss, stepped forward first. Voss's movements possessed a controlled inertia, an intentional slowness that seemed designed to force the observing Xylosians to wait, to actively consume the time it took for the Terran to transition from stasis to action. When Voss raised a gauntleted hand, a gesture recognized universally as one of non-aggression, though its meaning here felt strained, the sound that followed was unexpected. It was not a telepathic projection, nor a synthesized universal language, but a purely acoustic emission, modulated through the suit's external speakers, rendered in the precise, culturally neutral tones agreed upon through preliminary cipher exchange. Prime Curator Xylos, venerable counselors, we arrive at the designated nexus in peace under the explicit mandate of mutual understanding. The voice was flat, without the customary elaborate vocal ornamentation expected of serious diplomatic overtures. It was the sound of steel striking steel, precise, cold, and undeniable. The Prime Curator responded, his own voice resonating through the chamber's acoustic dampeners, designed to convey authority without causing physical distress to lesser-structured life forms. Terran Envoy Voss, your species' arrival has generated significant perturbation in the established order. We observe your chosen presentation, the cloaked uniformity, the deliberate pacing. Explain the necessity of this deliberate obstruction of direct engagement. Do you distrust our atmospheric calibration, or merely our capacity to perceive your inherent biological variances? Voss tilted his helmet slightly, a gesture that might have signified respect on another world, but here felt like an act of focused scrutiny. We employ sealed environmental integration for two primary reasons, Curator. First, efficiency. Our biological needs are drastically divergent from standard Type II atmospheres. To alter the environment of this chamber to suit us would constitute an imposition upon your established comfort. We prefer to adapt ourselves to existing parameters. Second, focus. The rituals of visual assessment are secondary to the exchange of informational constructs. We came prepared to discuss policy, not physiology. This response caused a perceptible tremor of confusion within the council. Efficiency over presentation, logic over intimidation. It was deeply alienating. The Cathar Dominion ambassador projected a wave of calculated skepticism. Efficiency at the cost of transparency is the hallmark of a species concealing intent. We require confirmation of the internal atmospheric mixture of your vessel and your personal shielding integrity. Our preliminary spectral scans indicate an unusual concentration of highly energetic, unstable isotopes within your personal shielding matrix. Voss did not hesitate. He signaled to the chief strategist, a figure whose posture suggested immense coiled readiness. The strategist activated a small mound. TED emitter on his forearm. A beam of highly controlled, focused electromagnetic energy, a projection of diagnostic intention, lanced across the observation gap, bathing the Zalosian dais in cool, sapphire light. The isotopes you detect, Cathar Dominion, are the byproduct of our primary energy containment field. It is a matter of public record within our local stellar sphere, though perhaps not yet cataloged in your galactic registry. We utilize controlled singularity microcores. The energy yield is exceptionally high, yes. The danger of catastrophic failure, however, is statistically negligible, maintained below the threshold of 1 incident per 10,000 million operational cycles. We are transparent regarding our power source because we wish you to understand the scale of the infrastructure required to sustain our recent expansion. We do not deceive with euphemisms, we present the raw physics. The level of bluntness shattered the expected diplomatic choreography. To speak so openly of raw, volatile power was either supreme confidence or unparalleled folly. The Signian Collective's representative pulsed rapidly, an indication of high-level data processing. Microsingularity containment, an archaic theoretical pursuit abandoned by most established powers due to inherent propagation instability. You claim success. Show us the mathematical proof of your containment field integrity. We require the foundational equations. This was the crux of the inevitable challenge. The Signian Collective viewed themselves as the ultimate arbiters of physical science. To demand the foundation was to demand the soul of their technology. Voss inclined his head again, a flicker of something that might have been controlled amusement crossing the opaque visor. We are prepared for this assessment. Cultural Observer, initiate Protocol Delta 907. The Cultural Observer, the quietest of the three, stepped slightly forward. Instead of data transmission, the observer extended a simple metallic rod, no more than a meter in length, which connected silently to a pre-designated port on the barrier separating the delegations. The rod was not a weapon, nor a complex sensor array. It appeared entirely inert. Yet, as the connection stabilized, the entirety of the Grand Conclave's projection system flickered violently. The swirling nebulae vanished, replaced by an incomprehensible torrent of pure, raw information, overlaid upon the physical structure of the chamber itself. It was not merely data. It was a structured, immersive rendering of the Terran understanding of physics. The Council saw, in agonizing, three-dimensional splendor, the geometric proof of their singularity containment matrix, a lattice of space-time manipulation so complex it momentarily overloaded the Zalosian sensory buffers. They saw the derivation from first principles, an entirely novel understanding of quantum entanglement woven into the fabric of the containment field, rendering its stability absolute, an inviolable constant. It was beautiful, terrifying, and undeniably correct, according to the fundamental principles the Zalosians themselves acknowledged. The sheer scope of the knowledge transfer paralyzed the assembled delegates. The required computational cycles to process even a fraction of the displayed mathematics were astronomical. It was clear. Humanity had not merely invented this technology. They had derived a deeper, more fundamental understanding of the universe's underlying mathematics than the combined intellect of the Zalosian Empire had achieved over 10 millennia. When the torrent ceased and the nebulae slowly reformed, the silence was absolute. The Signian representative remained motionless, its plasma signature flatlined in a state of systemic shock. Xylos Prime absorbed the implications, the vast cognitive architecture of his species struggling to recalibrate itself against this sudden, overwhelming input. That was a demonstration of fundamental comprehension that surpasses the collected works of the Fifth Age theorists, he projected, the statement stripped of all political posturing, reduced to a stark declaration of fact. Why reveal this capability immediately? Why not use it as leverage, as negotiation currency? Voss stepped back, allowing the strategist to retract the simple rod. Leverage implies scarcity, curator. Knowledge, when correct, is absolute. We do not negotiate fundamental truths. We present them for validation and shared utilization. We did not come to negotiate our existence. We came to initiate a dialogue regarding shared galactic responsibilities. Our expansion is rapid because our mastery over energy conversion is complete. We require access to stable navigational arrays and established resource exchange routes. We do not seek conquest. We seek integration into the existing system, offering in return solutions to inefficiencies you have tolerated for ages. This was the first layer of the human revelation. Their technology was not merely superior in application, but rooted in a more profound, more elegant grasp of reality itself. The underestimation dissolved, replaced by an awe bordering on terror. The Cathar ambassador recovered first, its resonance sharp and accusatory. Solutions? Your species exhibits profound internal fracturing. Your historical records, which we have painstakingly decrypted, are riddled with cycles of self-destruction, endemic localized violence, and irrational tribal adherence. How can a species so fundamentally unstable provide guidance to the organized structures of the galactic community? This was the psychological barrier, the cultural canyon. The Xylosians, built on rigid adherence to historical stability and preordained social roles, could not fathom how such chaotic internal dynamics could yield such objective, universal insight. Voss faced this challenge with an unnerving calm. You observe our history as a catalogue of errors, Cathar. We observe it as a crucible of refinement. The constant internal conflict, the very chaos you cite, is the engine of our evolution. Every failed governing structure, every localized war, every catastrophic philosophical dead end forces a complete reevaluation of premises. We are not stable, we are fiercely adaptive. Where your hierarchies rely on continuity, we rely on constant, brutal self-correction. He paused, allowing the weight of that statement to settle. We possess the capacity for profound error, yes, but we possess an equally profound, biologically ingrained mechanism to survive those errors by discarding failed concepts entirely, without sentimentality. We do not fear internal revolution. We treat it as necessary systemic maintenance. That, curator, is why our physics is cleaner. We purge the inefficient philosophical baggage that obscured the pure mathematics. The cultural observer then spoke, his voice softer, more nuanced than Voss's direct address, though still filtered through the helmet. Your concept of the self is communal, deeply integrated into the larger structure of the empire, is it not? Deviation is deviation from the collective good, punishable by reintegration or excision. Our concept is different. The individual Terran is a sovereign unit, fiercely protective of its cognitive autonomy. This radical individualism drives innovation because no single governing body can stifle an idea that challenges the core axiom. It must be proven wrong empirically, not merely politically suppressed. The philosophical gulf was now tangible. The Xylosians governed through harmony and consensus achieved over millennia, the humans governed through managed, productive friction. Xylos Prime leaned forward, the very structure of his carapace seeming to convey deep contemplation. We acknowledge the mathematical elegance. We concede the efficiency of your energy projection. But governance requires ethics, envoy. Your history is stained by events that violate the basic tenets of species preservation, genocidal tendencies, the deliberate creation of existential risk for fleeting tactical advantage. How do we integrate a species that views the sanctity of life as context-dependent? This was the ethical challenge, the ultimate test of human character against the established morality of the galaxy. Voss signaled to the strategist again. This time, the projection was not of equations, but of structured ethical arguments. It manifested as an overlaid holographic map displaying historical Terran conflicts, but the narrative flow was entirely different from the Xylosian interpretation. You see the violence, curator. We see the resolution. When we reached the zenith of our atomic capability, we did not succumb to mutual destruction. We stared into the abyss of self-annihilation, and in that moment we made a covenant, not enforced by centralized authority, but by universal, shared existential terror. That moment forged our prime ethical directive. Survival of the species supersedes all localized political objectives. The strategist overlaid a specific historical document, a foundational treatise signed by every competing political faction on Earth during their own age of crisis. This document, the Treaty of Sanity, establishes that any weapon capable of systemic collapse, once developed, must be simultaneously monitored and rendered inert by the entire collective. It is not enforced by external threat, but by internal, binding psychological contract. We do not fear the other species' weapons. We fear our own capacity for irrationality. Therefore, our external diplomacy is built upon the bedrock of absolute, undeniable commitment to non-escalation beyond existential defense. The Council absorbed the data. They saw the historical context, the near misses, the sheer, terrifying proximity to ruin. They witnessed a species that had stared into the void of its own potential madness, and rather than seeking external stability, had engineered an internal, unbreakable psychological firewall of mutual restraint. The sheer ethical weight of this self-imposed discipline was staggering. It implied a level of self-awareness and mutual accountability that dwarfed the Zalosian system of enforced adherence to ancestral law. This covenant, Xylos Prime slowly modulated, his internal processes running at maximum capacity. It is self-regulating, without external punitive measures from the hegemony. Precisely, Voss confirmed. We police our own potential for ultimate destruction. We offer you not our threat, but our resolution. Our technology allows us to bypass obstacles you have tolerated for epochs. Our ethics prevent us from weaponizing that knowledge beyond the scope of planetary defense and infrastructure development. We are Curator, a species that learned, through catastrophic failure, the exact price of hubris. The atmosphere in the conclave shifted from apprehension to something resembling profound philosophical reckoning. They were not dealing with conquerors or supplicants. They were dealing with a civilization that had passed a test their own long history suggested was impossible. The long night of political maneuvering seemed to have found its terminus. The Cygnian collective, recovering from the shock of the mathematical reveal, sent a carefully modulated frequency. Envoy Voss. If your claims regarding sustainable fusion containment and spatial field manipulation are accurate, and the initial evidence is suggestive, you possess the means to instantly resolve the lingering environmental crises impacting the outer colonies, crises which have plagued interspecies relations for centuries. That is correct, Voss affirmed. Our proprietary field stabilizers can correct atmospheric degradation and localized thermal anomalies with minimal energy input. We require only the navigational coordinates and the authorization to deploy the required infrastructure. This was the next layer of the reveal. The offer was immediate, practical aid, leveraging their superior knowledge to solve long-standing, intractable galactic problems. It was not a demand for resources, but an offer of unparalleled service. Xylos Prime initiated a high-level, shielded communication amongst the ruling members of the conclave, a flurry of conceptual exchange too fast and complex for the other species to intercept. The speed of their adaptation is terrifying. Their capacity for self-correction is proven. Their ethical structure, though violent in origin, appears ultimately more resilient than our own system of static law. If we refuse integration, we condemn entire sectors to ongoing decline while possessing the immediate solution. The decision, though fraught with peril, began to coalesce around necessity. The Zalosian Empire was built on stability and controlled expansion. Humanity offered disruptive, rapid advancement balanced by ironclad internal self-control. Xylos Prime opened the channel once more, his tone modulated to convey acceptance of a new reality. Envoy Voss, the conclave agrees to begin the preliminary steps toward mutual integration. The first task will be the assessment of the outer colony crises. Chief Strategist, you will work directly with our primary engineering corps. Observer, you will liaison with our sociological archives to calibrate our understanding of your internal structures. Voss executed a perfect, formal bow, a gesture so universal in its implication of acceptance that it spanned cultures. We accept these parameters, Curator. Our deployment vessel, the Ares Mandate, is prepared to launch the necessary automated stabilization platforms immediately upon clearance. The initial tension broke, replaced by the dizzying rush of high-stakes technological negotiation and cultural exchange. For the next several cycles, the conclave chamber became a nexus of frantic activity, the Zalosians attempting to assimilate the sheer volume of human engineering data being transmitted. The human delegation remained models of focused professionalism, never wavering, never displaying fatigue or emotional excess, their black-armored forms moving through the gilded halls of Xylos like perfectly calibrated instruments of change. They were calm, ethical precisely because they had paid the full cost of ethical failure, and devastatingly powerful due to their mastery of fundamental physics. The initial phase of integration proceeded flawlessly. Within the local standard cycle, the first atmospheric stabilization platforms, launched from the Ares Mandate, reached the most blighted colonial worlds. Sensor readings confirmed instant, targeted correction of thermal imbalances and atmospheric composition breaches. The relief across the affected sectors was instantaneous and palpable, shifting Galactic sentiment from fear to cautious optimism regarding the Terran presence. However, the true depth of human knowledge remained veiled, presented only in digestible, actionable segmi. NTS, a diplomatic strategy in itself, preventing systemic overload or inciting panic among the older powers. It was during a late-cycle review, conducted in a secure, shielded environment accessible only to the Prime Curator and the 3 human envoys, that the narrative thread began to subtly shift toward the required broader scope. Xylos Prime focused on Voss, the projection of his query carefully measured. Envoy, the data you have provided thus far, the singularity matrix, the atmospheric corrections, represents a level of advancement that suggests a civilization capable of traversing vast interstellar distances with ease. Yet your recorded expansion within your local region has been relatively compressed in historical terms. Where are the deep space exploration probes? Where are the long-duration colonization efforts that should accompany such mastery of propulsion? Voss adjusted a setting on his gauntlet, the sound of the mechanism almost imperceptible. Curator, you mistake the symptoms of our progress for its cause. We did not master the singularity core, then expand. We mastered it because we needed a solution to a constraint that preceded our technological boom. A constraint? The nature of your galactic sphere, Curator. The distance between viable stellar nurseries. The limitations imposed by the speed of conventional FTL travel, even with advanced warp technologies. We discovered early in our deep space forays that traversing the immense voids between this spiral arm and neighboring structures required energy expenditure that was simply unfeasible for colonization. We were quite literally trapped by the sheer emptiness between galaxies. This was a monumental claim. The current understanding held that the voids were vast but manageable by slow, generational vessels or high-level, localized warp jumps. The cultural observer activated a new projection, shifting the focus from physics to deep space cartography. The Conclave maintains comprehensive maps of the local group, correct? We observe that your maps cease at the recognized boundary of the local void cluster, correct? That is the empirical edge of known space, Xylos Prime confirmed. Indeed, the observer agreed. For us, that was the barrier. We spent resources, significant resources, even with our advanced energy systems, mapping what we termed the Great Nothing. We expected increasing entropy and decreasing background radiation. The projection zoomed outward, past the familiar constellations mapped by Xylosian sensors for millennia, past the recognized limits of the galactic boundary, into the true, terrifying intergalactic darkness. The image displayed was utterly devoid of expected stellar background noise. It was clean, perfectly black. What you perceive as the boundary of the local cluster, the observer continued, his voice gaining an almost reverent tone, is not a boundary of space, but a boundary of active processing. The strategist took over the narration, pointing to a specific infinitesimal region in the projected void, a region that Xylosian sensors registered as absolute zero energy flux. 5 Terran centuries ago, while mapping this void, our automated long-range spectral sensors detected a resonance. Not electromagnetic, not gravitational. A structured, highly ordered oscillation in the fabric of spacetime itself, a signal embedded in the geometry of the void, not propagated through it. Voss stepped forward, his posture conveying the full gravity of the moment. We were not trapped by distance, Curator. We were quarantined by a barrier we did not understand. The signal was a message, or perhaps a lock, placed by an intelligence operating on a scale incomprehensible to any civilization within this galaxy. The revelation slammed into the conclave with the force of a supernova. The Xylosian Empire, the political apex of this galactic segment, had always believed itself to be at the apex of local awareness. They had established their dominion assuming a vast, largely empty canvas for expansion, punctuated only by the slow emergence of comparable species. The idea of an external, overriding structure was destabilizing to their core identity. A signal, an ancient marker, Xylos Prime projected, the question laced with genuine awe. More, the observer stated. The structure of the resonance suggests a form of automated, self-sustaining maintenance system. We cracked the encoding, a feat that consumed the entirety of our theoretical physics capacity for decades. The message was not a greeting. It was a warning, relayed across unimaginable distance. The cultural observer finally displayed the decoded, translated message, rendered in the clear, unadorned Terran dialect, which the universal translator rendered with chilling clarity. The lattice is maintained. Deviation from established dimensional parameters is strictly prohibited. Containment integrity pending. Any localized energetic bloom exceeding threshold omega within the identified quadrant will result in systemic reset. A profound chill settled over the conclave. The Xylosian political philosophy, their pride in their millennia of ordered development, their very sense of place in the cosmos, was suddenly rendered provisional. They were not masters of their domain, they were subjects within a carefully managed enclosure. Threshold omega, the strategist explained, his voice tight. It corresponds precisely to the energy signature of a fully deployed, stable singularity containment array operating at maximum output. Our decision to pursue micro-singularity cores, which you viewed as archaic and dangerous, was not a path of reckless ambition, curator. It was the only viable means to achieve interstellar capability within the constraints imposed by the lattice. We were attempting to build ships that could punch through a wall that we did not yet know existed, using the highest density power source available that did not trigger the external reset protocol. The humans, underestimated as chaotic upstarts, had in fact been navigating a subtle ancient trap laid by powers utterly beyond the Xylosian understanding. Their internal strife, their violent history, had forced them to find the least cosmically conspicuous method of achieving the necessary breakthrough. A method the older, more overtly powerful galactic empires, relying on vast, easily detectable warp signatures, had never considered. You mean to tell us, Cathar ambassador projected, its resonance vibrating with horrified realization, that our established methods of FTL travel, the warp conduits that define our empire's reach, are in direct violation of this lattice. Your primary warp signatures bleed detectable energy across the dimensional membrane, Voss confirmed grimly. They are loud. They scream in the silence of the void. Your technology, while elegant within the local gravitational field, is an alarm bell to whatever intelligence established this quarantine. The slow, atmospheric build of political tension had culminated not in interspecies conflict, but in the revelation of a shared, existential jeopardy. The fear of the Terran hegemony was instantly transmuted into the fear of the architect, the entity or force maintaining the lattice. Xylos Prime felt the entire foundation of his civilization tremble. The Xylosian Empire was a system of controlled order. This lattice was the imposition of ultimate order. What is the lattice, envoy? Xylos Prime demanded, shedding the last vestiges of formality. What is it designed to contain or to prevent? We do not know the why, the cultural observer admitted. The message is a command, not an explanation, but we have identified something else, something within the signal that pertains directly to your empire, curator. The observer brought up a secondary data stream, a complex overlay on the lattice resonance map. It displayed a faint, ancient energetic signature emanating from a point deep within the uncharted, gravitationally turbulent zones of the Xylosian home galaxy, a sector the Xylosians had always considered natural, chaotic boundary space, too difficult to navigate for sustained habitation. This faint signature, the observer explained, is synchronized with the lattice's maintenance pulse. It suggests that the lattice is not just passively monitoring the local group, it is actively interacting with a specific locus within your territory. It is not merely keeping things in, it is guarding something out. The strategist finalized the horrifying implication. Our analysis indicates that this ancient locus is not a natural phenomenon. It is a megastructure, an artifact of immense non-local power partially shielded, but still emitting a stabilizing frequency that the lattice recognizes. We believe this artifact is the reason for this localized quarantine. The lattice is not confining the local galactic inhabitants. It is containing something that originated here or was imprisoned here. The implications were staggering. The Xylosian Empire, for all its perceived advancement, had unknowingly established its civilization upon the perimeter of an ancient, cosmic containment field, guarding a sleeping power of potentially unimaginable scope. Voss looked directly toward the Prime Curator, his visor reflecting the utter gravity of the shared moment. We came seeking integration, offering solutions to your energy crises. We now understand that the true crisis is not our entry into your political sphere, but the fact that your sphere is a cosmic cage. We possess the technology to understand and potentially manipulate the physics required to interface with this lattice structure. A knowledge your civilization, bound by its reliance on conventional FTL, could never safely achieve. He extended a single, gloved finger toward the map, detailing the ancient, hidden structure within the Zalosian core. The choice is no longer about whether you accept Huma. Nidhi, curator, it is about whether we face the architect or whatever it is guarding together. We have paid the price of understanding the rules of the enclosure. Now, we must decide if we dismantle the enclosure or reinforce it. The conclave remained silent, not in fear of the Terrans, but in contemplation of the vast, silent intelligence that governed the space beyond their local stars. The human envoys, so briefly underestimated, had revealed themselves not as a new political faction, but as the necessary key to unlocking the next level of cosmic reality. Their quiet ethics, forged in the fire of near self-destruction, had inadvertently equipped them to navigate a universe far older and far more governed than anyone in the Zalosian Empire had ever dared to imagine. The dialogue had shifted from diplomacy to shared survival against an unknown, supreme authority. The age of local galactic politics was over. The age of the lattice had begun.